30th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Call the meeting to order. We have President Anton, Tracy, absent is Jay and Michael. For staff, we have Mike and Patrick. Is Kim?
She's there.
Is Kim here? Kim's up there. And City Attorney Chris Hood. Open forum is the next item. Do we have anything to bring forward in open forum?
I got a phone call, and I think you had maybe gotten a phone call too, and it was in conversation to the dog,
Okay.
a variation in language, and actually
Yeah.
maybe convenient that Pat is here and Chris is here, and we could have a brief discussion on that issue.
Okay.
Nuisance dog, adding that language to nuisance dog, or nuisance dog leash law versus, anyways, I had a conversation with somebody about that. But that was the only item that I got.
Okay. I had a phone call when we had the power outage, because we were out of power for quite a while, and people were concerned about why we didn't have the generator running, but I think maybe we could address that at the end here. There was a reason for it, now that I found that out, so we can discuss that also at the end here. Okay, other than that, we'll move along to item D. Approved consent agenda. We have one item on there that's not normally on there, and that is the curling club consumption and display permit. Otherwise, the other three items are normally present. Approve agenda, approve meeting minutes, and approve payment and bills. Anybody want to pull anything for discussion on any of those top three items? And
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
okay, motion approved. Votes?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That includes the curling club consumption and display permit passes. Moving on to item E. The Empowering County Housing Development Authority. This is the public hearing also at the same time as we discuss this. Okay, so I guess we'll open it up for a public hearing. And we don't see anybody here for the public hearing, so I guess I'll let Mike just kind of brush over this real quick on what this basically is about, if that'd be fine.
That would be, I'd love to hear some more, because I've been,
Yeah. I mean, I've read it and I kind of understand, and I looked at the county website and read there. Basically, this is, they've hired somebody at the county level, and this whole thing, I think, was set up for Cook County, City of Grand Marais, Grand Portage, and they're going to have access to ways to help develop housing within our whole county, and we have to allow them to function within our city with this resolution. But Mike might have some more details.
Well, I'd just add a little more background. This is a
Yeah.
conversation between the city council and the county board that's been ongoing for maybe a few years now on how to do this. The EDA was the lead organization in the conversation as well, and they received some assistance from Minnesota Housing Partnership, some technical assistance. And we've had a series of meetings to talk about whether or not we want to have an HRA, what an HRA does, what's the difference between an HRA and an EDA. And the decision was made by everyone, but primarily by the county board, to create a county-wide HRA and to have that be a distinct body from the EDA. So the county HRA board is its own entity. It has its own statutory authorities. It's made up of members that are not EDA members, and it's going to have staff members that are not EDA staff members. So it's basically its own organization. There's a lot of overlap in the roles, but we thought as housing was a clear priority of both the city and the county, that it made a lot of sense to focus with creating an HRA entity that was specific to housing. The city used to have an HRA, and it was active until, well, at least the 80s, and some signs of some activity in the 90s as well, but it's been a very long time that there hasn't been anyone on the board and it hasn't taken any action. It's basically defunct. And with this resolution that you're looking at is just the legal step that makes it clear that what the city council wants to do is allow the county HRA to act inside the city limits as well. So we don't need to have our own separate entity. We really don't have any sort of official role in the HRA itself. You're not going to be appointing members to the board. You're not part of the official funding group of it. But of course, unofficially, we'll be closely connected with them. Staff will work together on a regular basis, the EDA, the HRA, the county, and the city, to try and make the housing goals happen. And anytime there are projects in the city, I'm sure that both the staff and the city council will be involved in the conversations about those projects. You may be asked to play a role in those projects.
And planning and zoning.
If planning and zoning approvals are required, yes. If not, I mean, I'm sure planning and zoning can feed input to the HRA in terms of things they'd like to see happen.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. They have a full board already?
They do.
Are there any members from the city on it? Or how does that work? Do they require members of Grand Portage, City of Grand Marais, Topia, Lutz, and Schroeder? I don't know. I was just asking that question.
I only know a couple of the people that are on there.
Well, I mean,
But yeah, but is it, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Just
Is it a
across-
requirement
I don't think it's a
to have-
requirement.
okay.
But I was just wondering if any of those that are on there are actually city residents, is what I was wondering. But I don't think there's a statutory requirement for it.
Yeah, I didn't know if there's a statutory. I thought maybe there might be considering.
I don't think there's a statutory requirement for it. I'm trying to just look quick and see if I can grab the membership from the county's website.
Yeah.
And, you know, unlike the EDA, my understanding is this new director they hired is actually a true county employee with benefits and another like department within the county, as opposed to the EDA being its sort of its own role.
I don't think it's quite that officially part of the county. They're piggybacking on the county's personnel system, but they're not, I don't think this is an employee of the county that, like, supervised by the county administrator or anything like that. They're hired directly by the HRA board rather than the county board, and they're paid through the HRA. The HRA ought to go to the county like the EDA does to
Obtain-
talk about funding and,
Yeah.
So it becomes its own separate entity like the EDA.
like the
Yeah.
EDA, yeah.
Okay.
Any more questions on Resolution 20?
I mean, I guess my only question would be, I mean, I'm in support of this, but just as is the city giving, this is beneficial to the city? There isn't like any sort of like, we're not all of a sudden going to be, well, this is happening and we don't have any control or power over it, I guess. That's the only thing I'm wondering. Like, I don't really know what will all come out of it, and maybe it's only positive things, but what yeah, I don't know.
Well, you
Nice.
don't have as much control as you would if you were like a
Creating our
signatory
own.
and appointing members of the board
Yeah.
of the HRA.
Yeah.
But obviously, anything that happens in the city, you have a lot of authority over,
Okay.
including setting all the rules about how zoning and.
Planning and zoning rules apply.
Yeah, so, and you know, the HRA is, I would doubt that they'd want to do something that you don't want to do. You know, that's just too difficult, and there's things that is easier path to do. The membership is,
Paul,
they've got one from each of their 5 districts,
Okay.
and then they've got 2 commissioners as well that are a part of it. So,
So 2 county commissioners sit on that.
Lawrence Doe, Chris Skildum, Mary Somnus, Chris O'Brien, William Gabler, and then Stacy Hawkins and Ann Sullivan.
So Ann and Stacy are
Stacy,
simply
yeah.
county commissioners.
They're both county
The other 5, which pulled up, are board members. But there's no portage, right, or is that Bill Gabler?
Well, there's no
Or did you say that that's not a requirement?
indication here.
It's not a
that
requirement, no,
That's a
but
requirement.
it's an area that
The
they-
districts that the city is included in, I don't believe these people live in the city limits, but I'm not sure about that. And I'm pretty sure the county doesn't have a requirement that someone has to live in the city.
Either way.
Yeah, and the process they used to fill out the HRA board was, they took applications, they received quite a few very quality applications, and they used a scoring rubric that considered their knowledges, abilities, experiences with funding, with serving on boards, with developing housing, with a whole variety of different areas, and ended up with a very qualified group of people to help us work on this.
Okay. Yep, that was my only real question, is making sure that we weren't giving something up that was beneficial. I mean, I guess we're giving up something, but hopefully it's for the positive.
I think that you can just change your mind about this anytime you want. Right, Chris? They could just pass another ordinance that says now they don't have HRA authority in the city.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, right now you don't have an HRA. So, I mean, there's, if you had a city HRA, that entity would operate largely autonomously as well.
Wow.
Your control would be to appoint people to the HRA and contribute money to the HRA through a levy, but beyond that would be the extent of your control. They otherwise would operate under their statutory authority to do housing projects primarily, and they would do housing projects in areas that are zoned to allow it. And, again, so you're relying, with the county HRA, you're relying on the zoning that you have in place, and whatever they do is gonna have to be compliant with that zoning.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I will make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-07.
So before you do that, we should close the public hearing.
Let's close the public hearing.
What do you say, Craig? Is it closed?
I guess it's closed.
All right.
We'll close the public hearing for this motion.
Okay, should I make a motion again?
You have to remake your motion, yes.
I will. I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-07.
Second.
Motion is seconded by Tracy. Motion was made by Anton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mo-
Idiot question, why
Oh.
did we close?
Because
Public hearing.
it was a public hearing along with this.
Oh,
yeah.
I see what you, on
It
top
was-
of being a normal public.
It was a
okay.
combined,
There's
Got
not
it.
typically you don't have a public hearing requirement for things that you do at a city council level, so it's just kind of an odd process,
yeah. So.
particularly when no one came.
Yeah. So motion passes. Resolution 2022-07, empowering county HRA public hearing, the motion for that passes. Anything else we need to do on that? You guys got to sign some stuff, I guess, but
Yeah.
after the fact. Okay. Moving on to agenda item F. Sheriff Pat Eliasen is here to discuss some things for us. Go ahead, Pat, come on up.
Excuse me, good evening. So, as you all know, we have a contract with the city to provide law enforcement, public safety services. That contract was drawn up, I believe, in 1997 or 98. And it requires, basically, it doesn't require a number of people, it requires a number of hours that we need to fulfill. And what those hours kind of shake out to when when you divide it by 2,080 hours a year for a full-time person is about 2 2/3, 2.5 to 2 2/3 people. So we already provide the 2 full-time people, and then we would hire an extra person for the summertime months every year. Well, due to facts, number one, lack of applicants for these positions, the seasonal nature of the job, And, you know, the housing market right now, the last few years, we've had a very difficult time even getting an applicant for this job. So this year we thought, instead of making it a full-time sworn peace officer position, we would make it a community service officer position. And that just means that the person is not sworn, so they can't make arrests. They can't use force unless they're defending themselves. They can't write state citations. But what they can do is they can enforce city ordinances. They can investigate accidents. They can investigate any calls that come into the city. If it's not going to be a call where there may be an arrest made. And if there is going to be an arrest made, we're still working on that. We've taken some of the job descriptions from other cities like Duluth and Minneapolis and that, and we're trying to blend some of that language into something that works for us in Grand Marais. Excuse me. So this person would be also responsible for general patrol. Like I said, answering calls for service, taking statements when there's statements to be taken, and simple investigations. And excuse me, to fulfill this, many people going to law enforcement school now need to complete an internship to fulfill their graduation requirements. And we thought this would be a great way to have somebody come in, help us out for the summertime, fulfill their graduation requirements, plus get a little bit of experience in a real-life setting. And if they want to continue on, they can, obviously. If they maybe didn't like the taste of law enforcement, then that's their choice. But it kind of, like I said, it kind of fills a couple of roles. And since we created the job at the county level, and it's going to be it's going to be a job, and it'll be a paid internship, basically. So we've rated the position. Like I said, it's been passed by the board. It's ready to go. And since we've done that, we've already had 2 applicants, and 2 very good applicants, I might say. I mean, I'd actually consider one of them for a full-time job with us at some point. So it's already turning out to be a decent idea. But I just wanted to come to you, let you know what we had thought of, how we kind of thought outside the box to try and make this happen. Because as you know, the city, in the summertime, it's like fisherman's picnic every weekend.
Yeah.
And trying to cover that with just two city deputies is very difficult, because what it does is when they are off, it draws in the county deputies to handle the city calls. So then we're basically running short everywhere. So by having this extra person here, and they'll be, they'll have a squad car, they'll have the whole works. They won't have a gun, like I said, they
I was
won't.
going to ask that.
And so this is where we're at, and I'll take any questions if you have any right now.
So you mentioned housing, which is everyone's terrible problem, but right now that's not an issue then for the 2 applicants you have?
Well, the one emailed me yesterday. He said he's very close to finding something now.
Okay.
So,
All
yeah.
right.
The
And
sooner
then
the
how
better.
does that line out when you envision, now you actually have real people to think through, but when you just think about it generally, and you're looking at someone who's still in school and internship, and you're right, summer's crazy here.
Mhm.
And so we're dealing with a lot of people who, it's not like the average person living here. Do you feel that this could ever be something overwhelming or too much decision I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but coming into a situation trying to decipher it? Or would you make sure there was an officer they could outreach to like right away when maybe this is bigger than I thought, or I don't know, whatever?
No, we've already designed a field training program for them. So when we hire a regular deputy, they go through 12 weeks of field training before they ever work by themselves. Now, this deputy, this community service officer, obviously trying to get them going between now and June 1st with a 12-week FTO program is going to be very difficult. It might have to be shortened, but not much. I mean, if we can get them hired by the middle of April, which is really pushing it, but we're committed to doing this, that gives us our 12 weeks, right, or 10 weeks for sure. And even if they have to go 2 weeks into the summertime to complete that FTO, then we know. What the downside of the FTO program is that at the end of that 12 weeks, if our field training officers decide that this person is not, and that's happened to us once.
It's not gonna work. Yeah.
And we let them go because we're not gonna put a bad product out there. You know, because it's number one, it's liability, and number two, it's a headache for me. And it's not good for the town, it's not good for the county, it's not good for anybody. So we try to vet them, you know, very thoroughly before that even happens with the, you know, a thorough background check, which includes everything from, you know, visiting their hometown and their neighbors and doing credit checks and, you know, past employers. It's quite extensive. So we are very, you know, hopeful that never happens again. And I'm not saying it's never going to happen again, but you know, there is that possibility. And if that does happen, we just do like we've done for the last few years, and we don't have an extra person in the summertime.
So is that kind of how it's been for the past couple summers? Has it been that way where this isn't like this summer, this is the first time you're going to be short of that 2/3?
No,
You
no,
need-
this is.
Were you short last summer?
We were last summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With all the
COVID
people
doesn't
we
help
had
it
in
any
town.
too, I suppose. I
No,
don't know.
and you know, and to be honest with you, the anti-law enforcement climate doesn't help it at all.
Yeah, I know,
Because I mean,
yeah.
there are at this point right now in the state of Minnesota, there are not enough people in law enforcement school everywhere to cover all of the retirements coming up. In
The
next-
needs, yeah.
Yeah, so, and we're up here, you know, it's a beautiful spot in the summertime, obviously, but, you know, trying to find a place to live can be difficult.
Is there ever an option, I suppose your budget doesn't allow you to have 2 interns?
Not right now, not right now.
So you kind of have
No.
to really hope the one you pick, and they want to stay too, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, and it has worked out in the past where we've actually kept our seasonal people on, you know. Angelique is one of them. She did the seasonal patrol for the city a few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And that was the last one that we had. And, you know, now she's back as a full-time deputy, and we've had another seasonal deputy who fulfilled the contract up in Grand Portage for the National Park Service, and he was able to stay here too. So, you know, when they come, they do want to stay, so that makes it nice. But, you know, unless we don't have a spot for them, then it's,
Right.
you know.
Well, I think
Interesting.
that seems like a pretty good, I mean, it's a good solution, you know, to, yeah, have a presence, I guess.
Right, and you know, there's been some talk in the past of, you know, added ordinance enforcement, and this person is going to be, you know, that's going to be one of their main things, is to enforce the city code, because they can do that.
Will they work in traffic? I mean, like traffic?
No,
They
they
can't do
won't.
traffic stops.
They can't do traffic stops, no.
Okay.
Accidents, absolutely, you know, if
Okay, they can show up on, yeah, okay.
parking problems,
Yep.
you know, things like that, absolutely.
Okay.
Obviously, like do business checks,
Mhm.
some of that kind of.
Just another person around, that's a
Right.
good thing, yeah.
Wayward campers camped all over town.
Yeah, absolutely.
The usual
That
suspects.
season's just starting up again, I suppose.
I don't know that it ended.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Pat. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that this is a great, both trying to fulfill your own needs and being responsive of what we're asking of you too, so I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Mhm, Yeah.
I would agree with that.
It's a way to fill a need for sure.
Yeah, no, get them hired.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
And I do want to just quickly say thank you for the donation towards the animal shelter. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for that, because that really started the whole project for us, and now we're really looking forward to moving ahead with that.
Good.
Good.
Yeah, no, thanks for, you kind of, yeah, that's good that that's moving forward. That's been a long time
Way
coming.
too long, yeah.
Yeah, 6 years, 6.
Did you want to bring up your?
Yeah, do you want?
What's that?
I feel like it's been as long as I've been on here. We've been
has.
talking about.
I brought it up
Probably
already.
a lot longer.
Probably a lot longer,
Yeah.
well, that I paid any attention to it anyway. Yeah, maybe, I guess, since you're here, we could just ask that, Craig had brought it up, last meeting maybe.
Somebody
Just
had talked to me, yeah.
Yeah, just about the idea, because we have a leash law in town. And the ask from this person was that idea of like more of a nuisance leash law versus like just either modifying that language, and Chris could probably go into that more, but, yeah, so that was what they were asking, you know, and I think it's a good idea. I mean, I know there's a handful of folks over the years that I can think of that, you know, it makes sense, obviously, those dogs and, you know, and time and place, right? Like, I think of where, you know, even the business park, where we walk our dogs, like, it's not till you get to the north side above the snowmobile trail where technically you're out of town and, you know, you can let your dogs off. And, you know, I guess I'd feel comfortable up in the woods up there with my dogs, but I would never let my dogs off a leash downtown, because I don't, you know, it's just wouldn't be good. So, like, I think it's like that kind of combination of personal responsibility for people who have animals that are well-trained, and they had basically said that they had some issues with, you know, getting cited, and, you know, anyway, so I don't know what your stance is or what your feeling is on that, and maybe that's not your place to weigh in on that, but.
No, I would support that. And just for the simple fact that, you know, in the wintertime or the season where there's nobody camping out at the park, you can go down there just about every day and people are walking their dogs, no leash down there. Well, technically, they should get a citation, but we're not gonna do that. And like you say, you know, people up at the school or at, you know, at the baseball field, you know, technically, that's in the city. So, I mean, there should be, you know, I would support language of more like a nuisance animal rather than just a straight leash law, absolutely.
So Chris, what do cities do, or is this one of the common options not? Is it an option?
I have no idea.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I don't know what the options are. It's not something that is typically, I'm not sure that I've ever even worked on a leash issue before. You know, I know that a lot of cities have leash laws that, you know, you're supposed to, you know, have dogs on a leash. I think, you know, the idea of, I mean, this is like selective enforcement.
Right.
That starts to get pretty hard. Because then you have an issue about, you know, how does law enforcement enforce that? You know, how do they, you know, what is deemed to be a nuisance, you know, where somebody, you know, can have a dog off leash. You know, I mean, I live in St. Paul. I've had my dogs, you know, many years, and you know, to be honest with you, you know, I've gotten close to getting a ticket one time. I know that friends have gotten tickets at parks and things. I mean, it's, you know, it's kind of, you know, part of living life in a city. You know, you use common sense. If nobody's around, then, you know, maybe you can let your dog run in the park, but doesn't mean I shouldn't be cited for it. But I don't know, without researching what other cities have done, I've not ever heard of something like this. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I would definitely be curious to know what are the criteria for that, because I don't think we want to be in a situation where, number one, law enforcement doesn't know how to apply it, because then it doesn't really work very well. And then, you know, if you get into a situation where you are sort of selectively enforcing, then you're ripe for a legal challenge on something like that, on constitutional grounds, that you are basically an equal protection claim, that, you know, you are selectively enforcing, and that you have no criteria to define, you know, what is deemed, and it has to be criteria that is objective, so that it's a standard that could be objectively applied by law enforcement too, in terms of what is deemed to be a dog that is a nuisance and should have been on a leash. I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I think you'd have to really look into that to see, you know, what are those options. But those would be my concerns just on the face of it.
We've already got some language about dogs as a nuisance in our code. and language about restraint within city limits are right next to each other. So if we just removed the leash requirement, for instance, we'd have this language. The owner of every animal shall prevent it from committing any act which constitute a nuisance. It is a public nuisance for any animal to habitually or frequently bark, howl, or cry, to chase vehicles, to frequent school grounds, parks, or public beaches, to molest or annoy any person if such person is not on the property of the owner of such pet, or to molest, defile, or destroy any property, public or private. So there's your criteria. And if a dog does any of those things, even if it's on a leash, we've already said that's a nuisance and it could be cited. So if we didn't have a leash requirement, there's your list of things that we're saying we've already decided are a nuisance, and maybe that covers it. So maybe it's just a simple question of, do you want to have a leash requirement or not?
When you talked about like location of where they were in part of the, did you mean like if the dog was just loose in one of those locations? This is sort of like a childhood thing, right? When dogs
Yeah.
just did their thing around
Well,
the neighborhood.
maybe the phrase was to frequent school grounds, parks, or public beaches.
Yeah, so is that the thought that they're just out,
By
you know,
themselves.
doing their thing like dogs used to do, right?
Seems like that's what's
Well, it
implied,
could be
although
private.
that could probably use a little cleaning up if we were
Yeah,
not
Could be private
requiring
land
leashes.
too. If you have a neighbor, now that the no leashes are required, you got a neighbor's dog going over to the other neighbor's house.
That
Sure.
actually is pretty common already, and we do require leashes.
Well, I know, but if you take away the leash,
Yeah.
are your calls gonna go up? That's all I'm saying.
We gotta keep this 2/3 of, 2/3 time, person busy.
I sometimes wonder how
Poop scoop included?
much this is really going to change anybody's behavior, period.
Yeah.
You know, you've got responsible pet owners, and whether or not they use a leash, they're generally not causing problems, and you've got pet owners that struggle. And
I think the issue is in the enforcement side,
yeah,
from at least what I've understood, in that people, whether they are feeling like that they're being singled out. Again, like, I've run into the dog, and it's one of the, it's super trained, right? It's super trained, and he's really good with the dog. But he's gotten cited, went to court and fought it, and won, actually, and then got a warning like a week or two ago, again, about not having his dog on a leash in town, So, that, and it's not, I don't know, I'm not trying to be like reactive and solve this one guy's problem either, but I think I can think of several examples of people that I know of around town. Again, I'm not saying I'm gonna do that with my dogs, because my dogs they're not well behaved enough to be like, yeah, let's just go run around downtown, right? I mean, I know that, right? That's part of being a responsible pet owner, I guess, but.
You also need to consider that there are people with disabilities and people that are afraid of dogs.
Yeah,
oh
absolutely.
yeah, we know,
Yeah,
And
Whether
that-
they're on a
that-
leash or
that-
not.
yeah.
That those people have a right to go to parks too,
right.
and I love my dog as much as anybody loves their dog, but we still need to be cognizant of that, and if you lose leash requirements, then you may run into some other issues too.
Right.
and then the language about leash requirements says that the animal is on a leash and is kept under the control of the owner or person charged with its care. So just being on a leash isn't enough. You can still be a nuisance
Right.
if they're not under the control. And you could change that and to an or, and maybe that cleans up some of that issue too. So it has to be on a leash or under the control. Now, you've opened up a pretty gray area here,
Yeah, back to Chris's comments.
but we've already defined what nuisance means.
Right.
This just gives an out for somebody who can demonstrate that their animal is actually under their control.
If that dog is on somebody's heel the whole time, it doesn't matter what's happening.
Yeah.
What does it matter if the dog is on a leash or not, is I guess my
Yeah.
point.
And I would
Right.
suspect that typically you and your deputies wouldn't consider that an issue either, so, but we've made it an ordinance that makes it illegal, so.
Sure. Yeah.
We can do some research and see if there are options that other cities have, and I think it would also be of use for us to hear, Pat, from you, like what circumstances would you want to cite somebody in? Because if we don't want to write a set of rules that don't fit the way that you think, is operable.
Yeah.
I just feel, this is one of our small town growing up issues, and I think it's been for a long time. But, and obviously there's no longer the generation that let their kids and their dogs out for the day, nor are there dogs sleeping out in the middle of the roads like there used to be, and you just sort of drive around them. And you certainly don't watch dogs chasing cars as much as you used to. But up here, I still feel like pets and dogs and whatever are more part of everyone's everyday life. I mean, how many people would come in the store and their dogs with them all day and and yet we have so many visitors to our community, and now we have a lot more residents to our community, and oftentimes a lot of people don't grow up with pets anymore. They aren't comfortable with animals, and they don't know anyone here, and they don't know that dog.
Right.
And so then we're never going to hit this on the money. It's always going to be sort of that balance thing. For the rest of us, most of us know what dog you're talking about, and I don't think twice about it.
Right.
So I don't know if we can regulate it one way or another, and when can you apply your common sense hat? And yeah, a lot of people are fearful of a lot of animals right now, but I can't help that or change that. And
I think that's why,
Sorry.
yeah. No, I think that's exactly why, like, we walk our dogs on a leash, is because we know they're not gonna hurt anybody, but people not everybody likes dogs, and so that's why you do it, just so people feel comfortable, But, yeah.
But you're also taking responsibility for yourself, your dog,
Yeah.
by putting it on a leash, knowing that you're going to be around people, many people, young kids. So, I mean, from a perspective of protecting your negligence, I think not having your dog on a leash is kind of putting yourself out there for a possibility of problems. An animal's an animal, and they'd be very well trained, but still there's always that one instance where something happens.
Yeah.
And then how do we talked about this nuisance thing before. It's like, well, how do you know a dog's a nuisance until it does something?
Right.
Now it's a nuisance. Well, it's a little late,
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know.
I guess I just feel like it certainly isn't anything we need to go looking for if it's not there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that very well, but
Well, we talked about this the last meeting I was here, and I asked you if you wanted me to research this, and that people said no, really. So there wasn't any follow-up on that.
Yeah.
That's still an option. We don't have to do any follow-up on this. If you're comfortable moving forward and hoping that folks can act with common sense.
That's kind of what I'm hoping.
But
you
if
can't regulate everything.
But if you want me to do some research, then Krista and I can look into this and bring some options, so just let me know.
Sure. I mean, if there's some better answers, someone else has found something.
All right, well, we'll just do some quick, research and see what we can find. And if there's a great option out there, we'll bring it back, and if not, we'll let you know.
So Pat,
Yeah.
like you have not just the city, but you have the whole county. Do you guys get a lot of calls on stuff like this?
We get some, but there's no leash law in the county, so if a dog's running down County Road 14 and goes into somebody's yard, it's like, well, is it being aggressive? No, it's just,
It's running around.
sniffing my car tires. Well, I don't know what to tell you.
So, so I mean, I know there's nothing you can do, but I mean, are people calling in just because they're like, oh my God, this dog is loose and it could do something? Or I feel a lot of times now people are worried that the dog is somehow going to get
Well, it's-
harmed or is lost. Or,
That's we get those as well. People see a dog and they grab it and they bring it to us, and and like you say, we know whose dog it is, and then we end up bringing the dog home, or we put it in the pound or in our garage and wait for the owner to call because their dog is missing. So yeah, we get some. It's not overwhelming by any means.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or does it pick up in the summertime?
It does a little bit,
Or people, I guess even in the city now, like, do you hear more commentary then? Because we're a really
It's-
dog-friendly town for
Yeah.
visitors. We get, a lot of people like to come here with their pets.
Mhm. No, it's I don't have the numbers obviously, but just thinking back in the last couple of years, I mean, it's not been that, not a whole lot.
That's good to know.
All right,
Okay. Well,
thanks.
we'll revisit this if we need to, I guess, if Mike wants to look at something.
Yeah,
So-
you can, I don't know. Can you
We'll
do
just do a
little
little,
searches and-
yeah, we'll do a little research, see what we can find.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if somebody had magical language, but.
I would also be surprised, but you never know. Somebody might have an idea that fits with us, so we'll see.
And the creation of the dog park might help too. I mean, when that gets opened up, that should help a little bit, I would think.
A little bit,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the folks that are gonna bring their pets to the dog park probably aren't causing a lot of problems right now,
Right.
anyway.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to,
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
thank you, Pat.
See you
Appreciate
guys, have a
that.
good evening.
Yep, good luck. Moving on to G, council staff reports. Who wants this? Tracy, do you have any?
No, I haven't.
Last
been
meeting of the month, probably not. I
into
don't.
anything. I think that the park, I'm not supposed to say Catholic Beach.
Oh.
Old Shore Beach Road.
Road.
Anyways, I think the meeting has been postponed till into April's.
Okay.
I missed the EDA meeting. I was down in the cities. It got rescheduled on the day I was out of town, so I couldn't go. Do I do planning commission updates? All right.
Sure,
Yeah?
yeah.
The only thing we had on the planning, I went to my first planning commission meeting and probably made it last way too long because I had a bunch of questions.
Last week, yeah.
But the North House was down talking about variance request on a shoreline setback, and, which was interesting for sure. And we actually asked them to come back to our next meeting, which is next Wednesday.
Do you guys meet weekly?
No, but it's,
Oh,
that,
just happened.
that was a reschedule.
They got rescheduled due to lack of quorum,
Oh,
so the March meeting happened last Wednesday rather than the first Wednesday of March.
Oh.
And so the
it's
next
kind of
one is the
strange.
first Wednesday of April.
Yeah. But just looking at what they're planning on doing down there and trying to get as much information kind of what's all involved in that. So it was interesting. They're doing a lot of neat, I think, really cool things that they don't necessarily have to do for shoreline protection, erosion, and stormwater capture and stuff like that. But we just asked them to come back with a little more information to see what their process has been. So we'll see what that looks like.
Okay.
I don't think, did you go to,
No.
has it been another,
I didn't go to that meeting.
I don't
The
think there was a
park.
quorum.
I don't think they had, yeah. Parks and Trails?
Yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise that's all I have.
Okay. I don't have anything for reports.
The outage,
Oh, yeah. Well, I was,
we'll talk about it
Yeah.
at next week's Public Utilities Commission meeting. It's actually,
okay.
it was going to be something on the agenda anyway. There's some equipment in the substation that needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
And we already ordered it before the outage.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to get, and in the meantime, we're not able to operate the power plant and feed the town.
Oh.
So it'll be a few more weeks before we'll be able to do that, potentially, another month or two even. So we're going as fast as we can to get that equipment replaced, and we'll give a full report on that at the PUC next week.
kind of supply issue stuff again in general? You ordering
Not
parts?
necessarily. I mean, supplies in this case meaning nobody's got these things sitting on a shelf where they can just mail them to us. We have to order them and they have to be manufactured and sent to us. But it seems like that's going to happen pretty quickly compared to some of the other things we've tried to order as of late. So that's good. It's good news. And this is something we ordered without any prior authorization even, we meant to talk to the PUC about it at next week's meeting and let them know what's happened. It's kind of a emergency, want to get this fixed as quick as possible, and then in the meantime, it turns out we needed the power plant.
We needed the power plant, but we couldn't have run it. We just didn't have it wasn't functional.
Yeah. So if there's a situation where there's a dire emergency, where running the power plant and connecting it to town is just an absolute must, there may be some things we can do to make that happen, but it would take some time, and it wouldn't necessarily be a good idea in general. So it's just, we're not going to have that as an option for the meantime.
Okay.
Is there, did we ever get a request or get a full list of phone numbers or emails to get a hold of customers with things like this, or notices and?
We've got a pretty good list of phone numbers, but we don't have a way to
Some
call
contact.
everyone, right? We have our notices, we've got social media and our website where we can put out emergency notices.
Okay.
Um,
Because in that storm, for example, when the power went out, I waited at home for an hour until I got in my pickup and drove around.
Yeah.
Found out there was nobody up at the power plant. I started thinking, okay, what's going on? Because I didn't even know, I didn't know we needed this part. I didn't know we were down. I thought, then I realized, well, if the storm is knocking trees down all over the place, they don't want to fire up the substation, not knowing what we're gonna cause more problems,
That's
To-
actually the typical problem we
Right.
have, is there's an outage and someone's out for 6 hours and they wonder why we don't run the plant, and, well, we do run the plant, but there's a problem between the plant and their house.
Right, we have to
That happens
isolate.
most outages that we have, where we would run the plant, unless it's a transmission line outage. In this case, it was.
Yeah.
There was also some things about the transmission line outage that took longer than typically would to fix. We didn't have any local crews that were able to work on it, so they had to come from Cloquet. And it's just a confluence of things that shouldn't typically happen, and we'll be able to prevent in a few more weeks.
Do we have any thought or long-term plan to encourage people to bury their lines?
That's
We-
been kind of the.
We've done a lot of that ourselves.
Yeah.
Burying of transmission lines, particularly in places where they're difficult for us to get to. We've had a number of pretty good-sized projects the past few summers where we've had crews come and do some burying for us. We don't have any way to encourage or require folks to do that on their own property after the meter, but it's pretty common that if it's buried to their house, then they also have it buried on their property as well. And it's also not very common that an outage on somebody's service line is going to cause problems for other folks. You know what I mean? Like if
It's
there's
like distribution lines. Or-
Yeah.
Well, I meant actually for them,
Oh.
you don't have to worry that something's gonna hit your line
Yeah.
into your house if you bury it. I think within my own alley, I look at all the lines, I think we might be the only ones with a buried line.
Hmm.
And then, of course, they're crossing over, I don't know. It just seems like it would make sense to kind of encourage people to do that.
Yeah, that, we also occasionally encourage people to notify us of troubled trees or try to keep them trimmed around their house. And we come through and do quite a bit of clearing in our own rights of ways. And if there's stuff on somebody's property that we think is a hazard, we're going to talk to them about it and figure out how to clear it. Yeah, we can talk about that too at the PUC, whether they want to have an effort to get people to bury service lines as well. I think most new construction, that's what they do.
Sure, but we're sitting in town with a lot of no new construction.
Yeah.
And we don't really need telephone line anymore, or cable line anymore.
That fiber's really nice though.
Yes, so, and fiber's buried,
It's all the same.
so.
Okay. Any other items to talk about? I think we're pretty much finished. Next meeting will be April 13th, 6:30 here. If nobody has anything else to say, I think we can adjourn this meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Yep.